Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So I think it's really easy to get distracted by new releases, and there is a lot of books from 2018 that I still haven't read that I really want to read. So I thought I'd do this video slash reading challenge where I'm going to talk about all the books, well, I'm going to talk about 20 books from 2018 that I would like to read in 2019. So these were all released in 2018. They're all pretty much well received, either that or I personally have a really strong desire to read them, but most of them have been really well received. And yeah, I just think I still want to be hyped for them even though they came out last year, because I'm sure many great books will be coming out in 2019, but I don't want to forget about these books and I definitely want to get around to reading them. So this is just like a little motivation to myself, and hopefully I'll read all of these in 2018. The first book is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is about a girl whose sister gets murdered and she decides to go off on a journey to find her sister's killer. At the same time, there is a podcast dedicated to true crime stories, I believe, and someone on the podcast hears about Sadie's story and decides that he's going to try and follow her journey. I believe that's what it's about. I have been a long time fan of Courtney Summers. She was my favourite author for years. I've got a review of every single book she's ever written on my blog, and I pretty much love all of them. My favourite is Some Girls Are, which if you haven't read that, you really should, especially if you enjoyed Sadie, because Some Girls Are, it's very brutal, massive trigger warnings for sexual abuse and kind of just suicidal tendencies, I guess, but it's such an important read, I think, especially if you're a teenage girl, to read about that kind of thing. She writes it so well, and it's a story that I'm pretty much going to remember for the rest of my life, which is really impressive. But anyway, back to Sadie. I've heard fantastic things about this. I'm so happy that everyone's finally raving about Courtney Summers, because she definitely deserves it as an author. I think I'm going to really enjoy this. I've heard that the ending isn't great, and I believe that's because every single one of Courtney Summers' books ends ambiguously, and sometimes I'm okay with that and sometimes I'm not okay with that. It really bothered me with All the Rage, for example, and it might bother me with this one depending on how it's done, but I already expect that from the ending, so I don't think it'll affect me as much as some people who have been complaining about it. It won't bother me as much. But yeah, I'm super excited to read this, and it'll definitely be higher on my list because I am a massive fan of the author. These aren't in any order, by the way, I'm just going through them kind of randomly, really, but the ones near the top of the list are the ones I kind of wrote down first, so if you want to read that as me being more interested in reading them, you can. Next book is Baby Teeth by Zoje Stage. This is a thriller. I haven't actually heard many people talk about this, but I requested the ARC and I got rejected for it, but I still really want to read it. And this is about a woman who moves in with her husband and his, I think, a teenage daughter. And the teenage daughter dislikes her new stepmother, and the stepmother dislikes her teenage daughter, and there's thrillery things happening around that. Cover's really eye-catching. It's got a pair of tweezers and then blood on a white cover. But this has been getting pretty good reviews. I've watched a few videos about the author talking about her life and stuff, and I found that really interesting. I love thrillers, and I've got high hopes for this one. It sounds like I read a book called Darling, which had a similar premise, but that turned out to not really be a thriller, it was more of a contemporary. So I'm hoping this one will be the thriller that I wanted from Darling, but even better. The next one is a fantasy, and that is Grim Lovelies by Megan Shepherd. I heard a bunch of YouTubers talk about this because they all got sent it in PR packages, and I don't think I've actually heard any of them review it. But this is about a group of people who, it's a fantasy world, and it's a group of people who were animals and they got transformed into people by a witch, and then the witch gets murdered and our main character gets accused of that murder. They have 3 days to solve the murder before they all turn back into animals, and they'll be animals forever and forget everything they knew. I just think it sounds like a really interesting premise. I watched, like I said, a bunch of the PR videos and all the kind of merchandise that they got sent got me interested in the book, because they had like badges with different groups on the badges, which implies there's like a bunch of different fantasy type either factions or like creatures and stuff. And I'm really into my fantasy at the moment. I've decided to stop saying that I don't enjoy fantasy, because I got some of my highest ratings from fantasy in 2018, and this sounds like it's going to be a really good one. The next book is another fantasy, and that's Blanca and Roja by Maureen McLemore. I've heard Books and Lala talk about this so much, and I think it was on her highest or her best rated books of 2018. But this is a fantasy story, and this is about two sisters, and one of them is destined to be turned into a swan. And that's basically all I know about it. I know there's a lot of focus on the sisterly bond. There's some unexpected thing with which sister becomes a swan, like they know which one it's going to be, and then it's not that one. There's something about two boys getting dragged into the curse. It sounds super interesting. I've heard fantastic reviews about it, and I don't really want to know more about this one because the blurb is kind of that brief, and I prefer, if the blurb is brief, I like it a lot better, because usually a detailed blurb will give away too many details. It's kind of obvious, but yeah. But yeah, I was really excited about reading it anyway, and then I heard this fantastic review from Books and Lala, who I love, and I knew I had to read it. It's one I was a little on the fence about, and that is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is a young adult thriller / murder mystery. It's about, there's a school, and years ago this murder happened, and it was committed by someone who was calling themselves Truly Devious, and they left notes, I believe. In the present day, a girl has come to the school, a student, and she's obsessed with true crime stuff, and she's convinced that she's going to solve this murder. However, the notes and stuff from Truly Devious start appearing again as soon as she tries to do anything, which implies that Truly Devious is still working at the school, or someone doesn't want her to find out what happens. I was super excited for this, and then I found out that it's got, like, it's one of a series, and the ending doesn't solve everything, which I'm not happy about, because I don't know, I feel like particularly with thrillers I don't want to invest in an entire series about them. The only time I've ever done that was Pretty Little Liars, and I was about 12, and that was not a great series of books. But yeah, I still do want to read it, and I think I will really enjoy it, but at least I know now that it's going to end that way, as opposed to if I hadn't found that out I would have been really angry by the ending, and I probably would have rated it much lower. So at least I can prepare myself for it. Next one is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. I don't think I've actually heard too many people talk about this, but this is a thriller type mystery story, and there is a boarding school for troubled girls. I believe it's set in like 2 timelines, so you've got the school in 1950, and then you've got the present day, and the bits about the school focus on these 4 girls who are really close friends, and then the one in the present day is about this journalist, and her sister died at the school. Her sister's boyfriend was convicted for the murder, but the journalist isn't so sure that she believes that, and she decides to go investigate what's happening. I've heard one YouTuber really rave about this, and it might have even been Books and Lala again, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But I like I said, I haven't really heard anyone else talk about this, but it's got really high ratings on Goodreads. I think it's got a really solid thriller premise. It sounds really intriguing. And I love stories about intense female friendships and the kind of nuances of that. And it feels like this book's going to have a lot of that, which I really am looking forward to. The next book is like a dark fantasy book, and that's Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaeffer. This is about a girl who works with her mother, and in this fantasy world her mother kidnaps fantasy creatures and kills them, and then our main character harvests their organs and they sell them together on the black market. However, one day her mother brings in someone alive, and the girl refuses to kill that person, ends up being sold on the market by her mother herself. So that's all I know about this book. It sounds really interesting. It's got the kind of dark elements that I like, and I like the idea of a dark fantasy world with fantastical creatures because that's my favourite part of fantasy world, if I'm honest. It has gotten good reviews on Goodreads, so I have high hopes for it. Next book is a young adult thriller / contemporary, and that is The Window by Amelia Brunskill. This is about Jess, and she has a twin sister called Anna, and Anna falls to her death climbing out the window to go see someone in the middle of the night, and Jess has no idea where she was going or what she was doing, and it's kind of about the police and everything say that Anna's death was just an accident, and Jess doesn't believe that, and she wants to find out what was going on in her sister's life, her twin sister's life, that she didn't know about. I've already said, but I really enjoy books about intense female friendships, and that extends to like sisterly bonds, particularly when they're done well, and it sounds like this is going to have a lot of that. It might be more grief focused than thriller focused, but either way I'm pretty sure I'm going to really enjoy it, and it intrigues me based off the premise. The next one's got so much hype here on BookTube, and that is Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. This is a fantasy horror thing, I believe. I originally thought it was a thriller and I was just completely off the mark, but this is about an island which is called Sawkill, and on this island teenage girls go missing, and the rumours are that they have been taken by a monster. That's pretty much all I know about it. I know it focuses, again, I think there's like 4 of them, there's usually 4, and a band of friends, and they're all teenage girls, and they decide that they're gonna like take down the monster. But I was already intrigued by the kind of horror elements of this, and I've just become more and more intrigued the more good reviews I've heard about it. I haven't read anything by this author, but I was debating reading Furyborn, but this is much more up my alley. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really good read. I don't know whether to save this for October, or whether I'm just going to read it probably earlier in the year, but I'm going to see how I feel. The next one I actually have a physical book of, and that is Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. Can never say that name. I cannot believe that I didn't read this in October. I bought it. Did I get it for my birthday? I got it for my birthday. Anyway, I got it for my birthday. This is a horror book with a comedic kind of twist. It's basically Scooby-Doo meets It by Stephen King, which is just like the best premise for me. But it's about a group of Scooby-Doo type people, and they went around and they solved murders with their dog, and then they solved their last murder, I believe, and then it jumps 18 years, and all of their lives have just kind of gone downhill. So one of them is dead, like the Fred type character died. One of them's in a mental asylum and keeps thinking that he sees the Fred type character. The dog is dead, the dog is gone, and there's a new dog that's like the kid of the original dog or whatever. And then I believe there becomes like a new thing that they have to solve, what I probably related to one of their old cases or something. Yeah, it just sounds, just that premise alone is perfect for me. I like the idea that it's going to be told in the past and in the present. I like the idea that it's like a massive Scooby-Doo parody, because I really, really love the Scooby-Doo movies. I used to watch the cartoon, of course, but you know, the CGI 2000s movies, I genuinely quite enjoy watching them, even though they're awful. So this is going to be like a massive nostalgia trip. And obviously I really love Stephen King's It, so I don't see how this can go wrong. I'm concerned about the writing style. I haven't really read any horror humour books, but to be honest, I'm going to read this. Again, I don't know whether to save it for October, but I don't think I can, because I've already put it off for like 4 or 5 months at this point, and yeah, I need to read it now. The next book is another thriller contemporary type thing, and that is The Cheerleaders by Cara Thomas. This is about a town called Sunnybrook, and in Sunnybrook all of the cheerleaders have died. They died under different circumstances. I believe 2 of them were murdered, 1 of them died in a car crash, maybe there was an accident involving another one. But the one who died in a car crash, I think her sister is our main character, and she finds something about the cheerleaders. She finds like a note in her stepdad's room or something that suggests that something happened with the cheerleaders and everything's not as it seems. This just sounds really interesting. I don't know a lot about it because it is a thriller and the premise is usually vague. I've heard like mixed things about this. I've heard it's fairly disappointing, but my hopes aren't exactly sky high for this one, so that might help with that. But yeah, it's just got an interesting premise. Can't really see how it can go wrong. The next book is another fantasy / fairy tale retelling book, and this is The Surface Breaks by Louise O'Neill. I read Only Ever Yours for the first time maybe 3-4 years ago, and I fell in love completely. I read it in like 3 hours. I was meant to be revising for my exams, my university exams, and instead I picked up this book and I couldn't put it back down. And I've read it twice since then, and both times I've just had to sit down and read it completely all the way through without putting it down. Louise O'Neill is such an intense writer. It's the only book I've ever read by her so far, and I'm trying to rectify that because I loved it so much. Her stuff is brutal, it's really feminist. I should say The Surface Breaks is a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid, and that's basically all the blurb says. That's all I need to hear. So her stuff is really intense, it's really brutal. Certainly Only Ever Yours is one of the bleakest things I've ever read, but like Courtney Summers, I think it's really important to read that kind of thing if you can. Obviously I know some people can't, they've lived through things that mean they can't read it, and that's absolutely fine, and you shouldn't push yourself to read anything like that if you don't want to. But yeah, to be honest, just the fact that it's Louise O'Neill and it's a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid is enough to get me to want to read this. I think her writing is absolutely beautiful, and I definitely need to read her other books as well. The next one is actually a contemporary, and it's What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This is a romance kind of thing about two boys who meet when one of them is mailing back his ex-boyfriend's things because he's just gotten out of a relationship. And it's basically about them trying to see if their relationship can work. It's literally all I know about it. Yeah, I'm intrigued by this. I haven't read anything by Becky Albertalli. I've read Adam Silvera's, I read History Is All You Left Me, and they both die at the end. I preferred They Both Die at the End, but they were both really enjoyable. Yeah, we'll have to see if this makes it onto the list of contemporary books that I actually really enjoy or not. The next book is another physical book that I can hold up, and that is A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. I've talked about this so much recently on my channel, so I'm going to be really brief. It's basically Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Alice in Wonderland, which two of my most favourite things ever. It's got a black protagonist. It apparently has really good representation. Haven't read it yet, so can't comment, and obviously I'm white, so I don't really feel like it's my place to comment anyway. But yeah, it's fantasy. Sounds like it's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited to read this. Cannot wait. On a similar vein, I've also talked about this one a lot recently, so again I'll be brief, and that is The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is a sci-fi murder mystery. It's about a investigator who wakes up each day in a different suspect's body and relives the day of the murder in that suspect's body. Sounds fantastic. Again, murder mysteries I absolutely love. Sci-fi elements being introduced into that is really cool and something I'd like to read more of, and I just need to read this book already because it's been so long now that I've been saying I'm going to read it and I haven't read it yet. The next book is another horror, and that is Scream All Night by Derek Milman. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about this, but I am super hyped to read it. This is about Dario, and his dad was a famous horror movie director, like B-list horror movies, so the really cheesy, really gory ones. And I think Dario used to star in the movies as well. He got emancipated from his father and decided he never wanted anything to do with these studios again. He then gets invited back to the studios by his brother, and there's like some kind of ceremony thing that's going to happen involving his father. He decides to go back, And then he gets sucked into the world of the studios, and that's what the blurb says. I love horror things. I love horror movies, like cheesy bad horror movies. They have a soft spot in my heart, so a horror book that is entirely about horror movies is something that I can definitely get on board with. I don't know if it's actually going to be like supernatural or not, which does concern me a little bit because I don't like supernatural elements if I don't know it's going to be supernatural, but that tends to apply more to thrillers than straight up horror, and I think I'll really enjoy this either way. But yeah, I'm really excited to read this. The next book is Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. I haven't actually heard much about this on BookTube, which surprises me because it was on a lot of TBRs when it came out, and it was on a lot of like most hyped releases of 2018, and then I don't think I actually heard any reviews of it, which is unusual. But this is a fantasy book. This is about a world where like the world flooded, and now there are monsters that live in this world, and our main character is a monster hunter, and she gets enlisted to help kill this monster for this village, and she goes and then she finds out something about this monster that means she has to like go on a quest, I believe. So she enlists the help of this modern medicine man, and it's basically about them travelling this fantasy world fighting monsters, which is all I need to hear. This is another one with representation. The main character is black based off the cover, and also there's a lot of like the fantasy elements aren't based on Western culture, which is really cool. But yeah, the only thing that concerns me is that I haven't heard a lot about people actually reading it, which either implies they read it and didn't like it and didn't want to talk about it, or no one picked this up. But it's got really good ratings on Goodreads. It's got above like a 4 average on Goodreads, and I'm excited to read it still. The final book is Broken Things by Lauren Oliver. People have been trashing this book, okay? Everyone who's read it has said it's really disappointing, and I've never ever read a Lauren Oliver book that I enjoyed. I don't think. And maybe I liked Before I Fall. I think that was by her. I really liked that one, but every other one has been awful. And yet, I want to read this, and that's because this is about 2 girls who were accused of killing their best friend because they all became obsessed with this fantasy/horror book thing. But the 2 girls didn't do it, and now they're trying to find out what actually happened to their friend. And that premise alone, I can't not read it with that premise, even though I know that everyone's read it, hasn't liked it. Like the people that I watch and people that I like the opinions of and share opinions with, they haven't liked this book, and I'm sure that I will probably end up not liking it. But I still really want to read it because that premise sounds so great. Yeah, I really hope that I'm the exception and I do love this book, because it would be nice, but we shall see. And that is all of the books from 2018. Well, it's not all of the books, but that is my top 20 from 2018 that I want to read in 2019. That's so hard to say. Yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, particularly if you've read the more obscure ones, because I know there's the big ones that everyone's read and everyone loves and have all the hype, but there's quite a few on this list, like the horror ones that most people I haven't heard talk about on BookTube, so if you've read any of those, that'd be really cool to hear. I will be doing these, I'll be covering them in my monthly wrap-ups and stuff like that, but I will also do a video at the end of the year where I recap these and what I thought of them when I have hopefully read them all. So when that is up in an entire year's time, I will post that link down below in case you're watching this in the future. But yeah, basically watch my wrap-ups if you want to know what I think about these when I do actually read them. Or if you're watching from the distant future of 2020, you can watch the video down below. Yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really, really want to still be hyped about all these 2018 releases and not get distracted by 2019 releases. So I think videos like this are important, and projects like this are important for me anyway, because we all can all get distracted by new books. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.